And welcome into Bet the Edge. It's Friday, August 5th. I want to thank everyone watching live with us on our NBC Sports YouTube channel. Today, we're talking NFL football because it's officially back. Last night's Hall of Fame game, Raiders and Jaguars, was a doozy, I guess you could call it. But today, we're going to handicap some season-long prop markets like the Offensive Player of the Year with our main man, Pat Daugherty, otherwise known as Roto Pat, PointsBet head trader Jay Croucher, otherwise known as Jay Croucher. Plus, as we always do, Drew and I, we're going to wrap up the show, Edge of the Days. I have a bonus pick today, so I'm giving you guys two picks. All that and more on Bet the Edge, powered by PointsBet. Drew, first off, I know you've been up early today. You're on the West Coast. I saw you tweeting this morning. So what did you think of last night's game? How much of it did you watch? And, of course, the favorite covered, the over hit. So football is officially back for bettors.
That was football. I guess. No, in reality, it was a tough hang. But when you're in the desert, you'll take any water, and I think that was sort of the overwhelming sentiment from a lot of hardcore football fans. And my major takeaways, the market move you saw on the Raiders was real. It was informed, obviously, by the expectation of the Raiders, basically using the first half as an opportunity to really get their backup quarterback competition squared away. Meanwhile, the Jaguars and Doug Peterson electing to give everyone the night off makes more sense to me from a philosophical standpoint about how you want to handle a Hall of Fame game in the preseason than what Josh McDaniels was doing. I mean, frankly, Josh McDaniels putting his running backs in harm's way for no reason seemed unnecessary. And I think ultimately what I'm kind of taking away from a lot of Josh McDaniels so far this preseason, the way he's conducting himself at camp, does not have me feeling great that that's going to be a super successful tenure in what is an extremely competitive AFC West. So if anything, last night kind of threw a little cold water on what I think of the McDaniels regime. But, it's a Hall of Fame game. So to take away anything is probably an overreaction. So how about you?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, anything saying negatively about these teams too much is an overreaction, in my opinion. Of course, you're Jacksonville Jaguars. I'm going to call them your lotto team for the whole season. Not much to hang their hat on besides Trayvon Walker getting his sack. That was the highlight, really, of the game, the last second touchdown. I did see, some people, I don't bet preseason football. To be honest with you, I don't see a whole lot of value in it, but there are some sharps that move in the markets like we saw last night. And you see the result of what happened with the Raiders blowing them out, it being a no contest. But, be careful betting first quarter unders, I would say, with preseason football. I saw a lot of guys on the under 6.5 and a 60-yard field goal attempt. Almost hit the over, but it did not. So, take that for what you will. But, Drew, do you bet preseason football?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it has to be an information. Yeah, I think there are two ways you can get down this time of year. The first is an information angle. You saw pretty clearly, I thought, for the Falcons Lions game next week. Falcons come out. Coach is transparent about he's going to use preseason game one as an opportunity to get Marcus Mariota real reps. And the market moved about 4 points. And I think that's, if you can get ahead of those types of moves, then I think those are actionable angles. You're not going to find very many, if any, NFL games this season where the market moves that aggressively and it's not, widely known information. So preseason football, I think, does give you an opportunity to really corner the market if you're grinding, coaching comments. Also, I still think teasers in the preseason are wildly underutilized. You need to find a place that's going to let you get down at a reasonable price for, a 6-point teaser. But the margins tend to be closer to 3 in general in the preseason. There are less, just true blowouts. There are less teams that are, kind of letting their offense really push, even if they're up by more than one score, which tends to lead to lower scoring games, tighter margins. And so I think in general, basic teaser strategy that works in the regular season is even more effective in the preseason. You just have fewer games to exercise that.
Okay, it might be something worth trying out for some people. A little lunch money on some teasers because we all know we're going to be playing them during the regular season. That's a fact. But yeah, definitely get your information. Make sure you guys follow the right people. But before we bring in Jay and Roto Pat talk some NFL futures, make sure you guys go ahead and download the NBC Sports Predictor app powered by PointsBet. It's free. It's in all your app stores. You can win thousands of dollars by just predicting what's going to happen. MLB season's still underway. PGA Tour. We got the NASCAR circuit. Of course, football is back. And on Tuesdays and Thursdays, Battle of the Bets. I'll be on Thursday. You can agree or disagree with our experts. Shot to collect some cash. I've been so cool in baseball, Drew. I'm fading another capper. So I want you guys to fade me, fading somebody else on Thursday's episode of Battle of the Bets. So you guys go download the app. Like I said, it's free and you can win money on that. So let's get Jay. Let's get RotoPat. Let's get ready to talk some regular season rushing yards leader, because I'm pretty excited to talk about running backs in general. I'm a guy in fantasy. I'm drafting 2 or 3 running backs in the first 4 rounds, and I'm making the playoffs. You better believe it. But when we're playing this long season of a prop market for the rushing leaders, we see Derrick Henry and Jonathan Taylor as the co-leaders. Jay, I know you have some strong feelings on Derrick Henry. Where are you going with this market? Where you see people betting it, and where would you put your money?
Yeah, well, I guess given my role, I never like to talk about the favorite as my pick for the market. I feel like I should come up with a sharper, more kind of niche angle. But I just think the gap between Jonathan Taylor and every other player at the position is pretty significant. I mean, this guy was averaging his rushing yards over under was consistently over 100 yards at the end of the season. Matt Ryan comes in. They still don't really have a number 2 receiver, some question marks at the tight end position. And the sneaky thing with Taylor, which I think people forget, is that there was a perception last year that Indianapolis had an amazing offensive line. They didn't. They were banged up all season. They were missing people. They had players underperforming. Quentin Nelson wasn't himself all year. I think that they're going to have a better offensive line this year. I think Taylor is a generational talent at the position. And so a plus 500, I mean, he lapped the field last year. It wasn't even close. And I don't like Derrick Henry this season. All the stats around his explosiveness, yards after contact, they all dropped last year. So I think Taylor is clearly the guy in this market.
Pat, what do you think about that? You are riding with him? Because, I mean, there hasn't been, besides Derrick Henry in 2018, 2019, you have to go all the way back to 2006 and 2007 when LaDainian Tomlinson won this back-to-back. So do you feel like Jonathan Taylor's a running way to win this rushing title back-to-back?
Yeah, I mean, I agree that he should be the prohibitive favorite, because it's been a long time since someone's gone back-to-back. It's also been a long time since John Taylor's 22, 23 has won the rushing title. I mean, he's squarely, like, we tend to think, peak athletic performance is normally like age 26, 27 for an NFL running back. It's really like 23, 24, maybe 25. And with Taylor too, like, it's weird. Like, we had like a 23-year-old player, have just incredibly dominant rushing performance. And I still feel like people are mostly trying to like find like the negatives. Like one of the, not that people are like really like nitpicking Jonathan Taylor, but like one of the main storylines out of the Colts backfield this summer is how Nyheim Hines is going to like catch more passes. And, maybe that's true, but it's something that, first off, that is every summer a storyline. And to me, it's one of those classic like summer camp storylines. Like when the season really starts, are the Colts really going to be yanking Jonathan Taylor off the field that much for Nyheim Hines? I mean, maybe they're going to try to get both backs on the field. Matt Ryan, of course, has a reputation for targeting running backs. But so I don't know what this isn't really probably a great point to make on Jonathan Taylor rushing futures, but just like, I'm not really paying any attention to Nyheim Hines hype in Indianapolis this summer, just because why? I mean, assuming rational coaching amongst NFL coaches is always very dangerous, but just why would Nyheim Hines be getting any snaps at the expense of Jonathan Taylor? Of course he's going to get snaps. I mean, like increased snaps, like, just why would you do that if you have Jonathan Taylor? And I will end my very long point now.
I can't disagree with any of these points. I think the Hines buzz is more about the other parts of their offense being kind of thin and weak, right? Like they might have to use him as a slot receiver just because they don't have another good third option, as opposed to in any way cannibalizing Taylor. It's crazy. It feels like Taylor's been in our lives for like 5-6 years, but this is only his 3rd season in the NFL. So he literally is like very, very fresh relative to some of the other running backs who have sort of premier roles in the offense. There are very few now that kind of really do have kind of outsized roles within offenses. And Jay's point about the offensive line not being great for the Colts last year. That is extremely true. It was not a factor in terms of really, in large part, having Quentin Nelson in front of you is always good, but it still was a lot more Taylor's true talent that shone through, I thought, last year. The only thing I can throw a little cold water on the Taylor, love fest here is that Colts are going to be good. They might have some, their schedule's pretty soft. They might have big enough leads late in games that they can kind of put Taylor on ice a little bit, as opposed to really kind of pushing him, into being the guy that puts away those leads. They may be able to, really actually utilize some guys down their depth chart and try to save Taylor up for a late season or postseason run. So that's the only very, very, very kind of slight cold water I can throw on them. And then you can't really look down the board and highlight any other guys that stand out as potentially capturing a big time role unless there are other injuries. And so you need to be maybe a little bit creative looking for a long shot here and trying to kind of narrow down, like, is there a guy who is expected to be the kind of the number one who you think is injury prone, and the backup or the young guy, a second year player or even a rookie may be able to step in and really kind of seize that opportunity and carry it to a rushing title. It's possible, but I don't really have any clear names in that discussion. So I think it's Taylor or pass, really, for me. Any long shots stand out to you, Jay?
Not really. It's so difficult because the long shots, they're only going to come up if there's injuries, and it's just so difficult to predict what's going to happen there. I do think that if Deshaun Watson, if he is suspended the whole season, then I think Nick Chubb becomes a little bit more interesting, but still there's the Kareem Hunt situation there. So no, I think it's Taylor or pass for me as well. I mean, if it was a little bit longer, maybe someone like a Saquon Barkley, who has the underlying talent and has been injured. But I think if you're looking at that, you're better off just betting Saquon Barkley for comeback player of the year, because if he wins the rushing title or comes close, then he probably wins comeback player of the year. So no, I'd be looking at Taylor and then struggling for value elsewhere.
Drew, producer Adam pointed out that as soon as you began truthing Jonathan Taylor, a black cat climbed in your window. And
yeah.
When I was perusing the odds, as I do, I wake up every morning and just diving through these futures. I just plus 3,300 for Christian McCaffrey. What would that number be if we just knew? If someone told you today that Christian McCaffrey would play all 17 games, that does feel very, very, very long for such a special talent. Yeah. And we know that the injury-prone narrative. We also know that could just be dumb luck at what is maybe the most injury-prone position in American sports, and maybe CMC will finally just have good health luck this season. So I was like, wow, that's pretty long for such a special guy. Saquon plus 5,000 did stand out. When I was looking for like real long shots, like we're getting like true galaxy brain. It's like, Jeff Wilson plus 15,000. Elijah Mitchell, they're talking about his durability concerns. He's been talking up Jeff Wilson, Shanny. Not that I would ever actually place this bet, but that did catch my attention.
Yeah, no, that checks out. I think I can only add to the CMC conversation. Like, if you want to make a case that he's your best, ends up being the fantasy MVP of the season, I'll listen to that. But, I think his most valuable role will be utilized in the passing game. You want more touches in, you want to at least balance his touches receiving and rushing. And oh, by the way, the Carolina Panthers might be in a lot of negative game states where it is a passing attack that is required for them. So that automatically throws a little cold water on what his rushing total might be. But, all that said, if the price is right, he obviously has the talent that he has to be considered. So this is a tough one, guys.
Yeah, it was really tough to find. I kind of agree with like Taylor or bust. Like there was just nothing that compelling beyond Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. I think the receiver market is a little tougher to cap when we're talking about most receiving yards. I mean, there's Cooper Kupp last year. I feel like he's not going to be able to repeat that. And I know that seems wild, but we're going to get to Justin Jefferson, in my opinion. He's going to be the guy. He's getting the head coach and OC over from the Rams, not Sean McVay, but the OC and the tight ends coach from the Rams from last season will now be the head coach and OC for the Vikings. So very pass-happy offense for Justin Jefferson, a guy who had 167 targets last year. But, Cooper Kupp, 1,947 yards. Nobody's won it back-to-back years, the receiving title, since Calvin Megatron Johnson did in 2012 and 2011. Pat, I'll start with you. Where are we going with this one? Is it a receiver? Hopefully not a tight end. No tight end has ever led the NFL in receiving yards, so don't give me the Travis Kelce hype. But who you got a receiver?
I mean, it's for me. So the way like the J felt about Jonathan Taylor, it's kind of how I feel about Justin Jefferson, where I just feel like he is the runaway favorite to lead the NFL in yards this year. I mean, it's back-to-back just special seasons. He's finally getting into a real offensive system. Hopefully the same system that just produced the second most receiving yards in NFL history for Cooper Kupp. Hopefully we get at least some kind of Rams light system with the Vikings. We know it's not going to be like a total clone of the Sean McVay system, but we also know it should be at least in the same ballpark. And it's like a player who was that good and that statistically dominant in an offense that just didn't operate in a 21st century fashion. Basically, by the end of Mike Zimmer's days, playing games to come down to a coin flip, like an offense that might actually just be playing 2022 football this year. And that's like the production is really, I should say, the past 3 years, LSU, it's like a truly historic season. It seems like a truly special player, already having special seasons in adverse circumstances. Now, hopefully, in much more ideal circumstances. It's kind of hard for me to just not be totally in love with Justin Jefferson this year.
How do you feel about that, Jay? Are you in the same boat, or there's someone else worth betting on? Because I mean, it's Devontae Adams now with Derek Carr, like 1,500 odds. That seems pretty tempting. Stephon Diggs still got Josh Allen. CeeDee Lamb now, no Amari Cooper. CeeDee Lamb's got Michael Gallup and whoever else you want to throw out there for the Cowboys. But who do you like besides Justin Jefferson? Because I mean, I feel like it's going to be just nothing but love for him, like we gave Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah, well, the way Pat feels about Justin Jefferson is the way I feel about Cooper Kupp, where Cooper Kupp lapped the field last year. He's 331 yards clear of everyone else. He did play all 17 games, which is a factor. But, as someone last year who was heavily invested in Cooper Kupp's failure and watching Kupp every single week, waiting for someone to figure him out, for someone to give him the treatment that Baltimore gave Devontae Adams, where they was triple teaming him, or the Bears gave Justin Jefferson late in the season. I think Kupp is he's just unguardable because you can just put him anywhere on the field. He does every single thing well. He's a deep threat and the best slot receiver in the game. He blocks. It'll be interesting to see how Allen Robinson changes his target share and where the targets come. And actually, I don't mind Allen Robinson at 40-1 just because he has a real quarterback for the first time ever. And he had, I think, 1,250 yards like 2 years ago with Trubisky and Foles. And in Rams training camp, he's being talked about as a religious figure with how he looks. So that would be one. But I think Kupp is the guy. Jefferson, obviously. And then the other one that I would look at is Deebo Samuel at 25-1, where Deebo had 1,400 yards last year and missed 2.5 games. And now Trey Lance, I think, provides more of a deep threat possibility than Jimmy Garoppolo did. Check down Jimmy. So we'll see how it works with Deebo's rushing and whether the contract now being signed means that he's more okay with rushing and putting his body at risk, or was a part of the extension that no, he's going to be used more as a wide receiver. I know there are other clauses in the contract around rushing, but he's another guy just because he's hugely high upside. And Trey Lance as well is high upside. So at 25-1, I don't mind Deebo.
Deebo is another guy who stood out to me because it's kind of a memory hold. I feel like that he was second in the NFL in receiving when they turned him in to, like slashing back Deebo Samuel last year. And it's another situation where you can kind of take advantage of uncertainty where, every day, like the Trey Lance story, like the Trey Lance storylines have not gone positive, like all offseason. So it has people kind of like probably unnecessarily scared of an offense that has produced numbers even when like Nick Mullins and CJ Beathard are like, where like people were going to get counting stats in this Kyle Shanahan offense no matter what. And throwing around the phrase like special player, like Deebo Samuel is clearly a truly special player, one of the most unique players like of the 21st century probably at this point. And like he turned the receiving on back towards the end of last season too. And like I said, it could be hopefully a far more dynamic deep game for the 49ers, if nothing else, like Jay said, in the passing game. And Deebo, the Deebo odds really, really caught my attention as something down the board that seemed very appetizing.
This is tough, guys, and this is a great discussion. And there are a lot of candidates that you can talk about here. Whereas we only really had Jonathan Taylor to kind of preen over in the rushing market. You can make a case for a lot of these guys at the top. I like the case for Jefferson just based on the uptick in passing potentially is a reasonable expectation for that offense. Cooper Kupp is the best receiver in the game in terms of route running, and his chemistry with Stafford is unquestionable. Maybe you can, if you want to eliminate guys, 8-1's not enough for Jefferson for me. Stafford with the elbow injury and in general, the Rams running a little bit more conservative offense is enough for me to scratch Kupp at 9-1, which leaves me with the next two on that order in Jamar Chase and CeeDee Lamb. Chase is fascinating to me because so much of his production last year was created by himself. It wasn't the way he was schemed. It wasn't the way he was, he was targeted. He literally just did it on his own. And that's, to me, if he can recreate any of that on top of them utilizing him even more aggressively, I think his upside is enormous. On top of, even beyond that, you look at the Cincinnati Bengals schedule and they are facing an absolute gauntlet, particularly down the stretch this year. So the idea that they're going to have to, be a relatively pass heavy offense, I think is very real. Even if things are going, even if the season doesn't, turn out as gloriously as last season for this team overall, they're going to be in some absolute shootouts. They're going to be forced to throw in a lot of these games where they're going up against elite competition. So Chase at 10-1 to me is interesting. A lot of people are high on CeeDee Lamb for this particular market, and that makes sense as well because the Cowboys at this point, between injury and between just in general not having a very deep roster of passing targets, he does look like a funnel in terms of just what he's going to get volume wise, but never really been super impressed by the chemistry between Lamb and Dak Prescott. So I think 13-1, you can pretty much scratch him. I laugh at the Diggs price at 14-1, way too many mouths to feed in Buffalo. Diggs a little bit on the decline. I laugh at Devontae Adams price at 15-1. I don't think realistically, you can expect the offense, the passing offense, at least in Las Vegas, to be prolific enough to support that. Question that I have for you, Jay, as the bookmaker, where's Romeo Doubs? He's not on your list at all, and he is now emerging as wide receiver 1 in Green Bay.
Seems like an oversight.
I was real high on Doubs after reading some of Aaron Rodgers' comments yesterday, and then I read Aaron Rodgers' comments comparing Rasul Douglas to Charles Woodson, and so I knew he was just something was going on. Something in his brain wasn't quite.
Just came correctly. Off a cleanse.
So something was. So now I don't know what to believe about Romeo Doubs. But I want to use that kind of jokingly to ask, a lot of the offenses that we're talking about, a lot of the prolific passing offenses in general have a lot of mouths to feed. But there are a couple out there where you have elite quarterbacks. Pat Mahomes is one, and Aaron Rodgers is another, where you don't have a clear wide receiver 1 established. Is there a chance that a long shot emerges from either of those two elite passing offenses?
I mean, potentially. I'd say the one thing with Green Bay is that Rodgers isn't a guy who puts up 5,000 yards passing. He's always around slightly over 4,000. So and with the in Green Bay as well, it's the same reason I wouldn't really like Stephon Diggs or Gabriel Davis that much either. I just don't think that one of these guys is going to break through to put up 1,800 yards, which, I mean, It's an interesting thought. How many yards will you need? Probably at least 1,700, really, with Kupp, who was over. I think Kupp was 1947 last year, and Jefferson was sniffing 1,700. So it's just, the thing is that Kupp breaks all of these markets and what we thought, because last year he just came from nowhere. He was going outside the top 40 in fantasy drafts, and he has the greatest wide receiver season, or one of, in history. And so I just think people need to remember that that's not how this usually happens. Guys who win the rushing title or the receiving title, they usually have some track record of at least being pretty good, better than Kupp was previously. I think it's difficult to see a long shot with all these guys like Jefferson, Chase, Kupp, Devontae, and so forth. But, I think Kupp taught us that can't take anything for granted in this market anymore.
Real quick before we switched, I was wondering what you thought of A.J. Brown at 30-1. And we know all the narratives, receivers changing teams, blah, blah, blah. historically run-heavy offense after week 6 last year, but talk of more balance this year. Everyone else in this offense has kind of been various stages of disappointment. It's hard to call Dallas Goedert a disappointment, but maybe an offense where it's just ripe for someone to come in and have like a 30 to 35% target share. He's a special player. Just didn't know what you thought of AJ Brown at 30 to 1.
Frankly, as much as I like him as a player and as much as I like him as sort of the key ingredient to really take this offense to the next level, the Eagles had a very telltale way of handling games where they had a lead last year, where they took the air out of the ball so effectively.
See, even when they didn't have the lead,
even when they were masterful at shortening the game in the second half of football games last year. And frankly, if you look at their schedule, it is easy enough that I can see a lot of those opportunities. And so if you told me that there was one guy who was going to have the biggest imbalance of first half targets to second half targets, just in general, in game by game, AJ Brown is at the top of that list. He may struggle to get C10 targets a game, even if he's getting 6-7 looks in the first half of a lot of these contests. So, Eagles schedule too easy to, I think, to expect him to have, a monstrous season as much as I like him as a talent.
I really love that take, Drew, because AJ Brown was my long shot too, like Justin Jefferson, AJ Brown, because if I find it similar, and if you guys watched last night, the Hall of Fame game, when Matthew Berry made his appearance, he talked about Jalen Hurts' fantasy status, and that's going to take a leap. Josh Allen, before they got Stephon Diggs, threw for 3,089 yards. With Diggs the next season, 4,544. So I definitely think, Jalen Hurts and AJ Brown is going to be a connection worth watching, but we're going to talk about that next. We're going to talk about regular season passing yards, handicap the Offensive Player of the Year awards. But before we do that, weekends are still better because the NFL does take over Sundays. But before Sunday football, we have MLB Sunday leadoff coverage presented by Uber Eats. You guys can watch the Astros and the Guardians in Cleveland on this Sunday, August 7th, 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time, NBC and Peacock streaming. You guys can download the app. You'll get more. Go to peacocktv.com/MLB for that. You get on the Sports Predictor app powered by PointsBet, free Grand Slam. Again, we're giving you guys free money to download an app. So make sure you check out the Astros. Probably put the smackdown on the Guardians. Let's talk about the passing yards leader. This market, to me, is pretty interesting as well. We see Justin Herbert leading the pack at plus 650. Tom Brady right behind him. Brady last year threw for 5,316 passing yards. The last QB to lead the NFL in passing yards back-to-back seasons, Drew Brees. He did it 3 times, 2014 to 2016. So, are we buying in to the timeless Tom Brady, Jay? Are people buying in to Tom Brady? Because, if you look at their schedule, there's a lot of poor secondaries that he's going to be going against this season.
Yeah, and the thing with Brady, too, is that that Tampa is going to throw. That's just what they do. And that's why, someone like Joe Burrow, who I know has gotten a lot of hype for this, at 10 to 1, which I can see all the reasons why. The shackles were let off as the knee got better in the second half of the year. All of that. At the same time, I just don't trust Zach Taylor to be more aggressive with the play calling. I think in his heart, Zach Taylor really wants to run the ball. He really wants to punt on 4th down. And I just don't really trust that. So I would be looking at longer shots for this. I think that with the favorites, it's just so difficult because there were 5 guys last year who threw for over 4,800 yards. Like, this is the environment now. It is difficult to take a short price in this market, but looking a bit further down the board, for all the reasons that Pat outlined about Justin Jefferson, I'd be looking at Kirk Cousins at 20 to 1, just because there is the upside with the new offensive regime, which will be probably more modernized, and huge upside with Jefferson. And then, you guys might laugh at this, but if you go further down the board, 80 to 1, Baker Mayfield. He averaged 266 yards per game passing as a rookie, and then the identity of that team shifted to offensive line and running the ball. I think that Baker has weapons. That team is going to be throwing a lot, I think. And look, I think that he is talented enough where it's in the realm of possibility that he could put up a lot of volume stats. Because a bet on this isn't saying that the team is going to be good. Deshaun Watson won it on a garbage Houston team 2 years ago. So I just think that Baker Mayfield, 80 to 1, it's not the worst bet in the world.
I wish I wasn't saying this, but I'm sad that someone brought up Kirk Cousins before me. It's because I kind of feel like Kirk. It could be one of those where he has like a 2014 Ben Roethlisberger year, where I think that was a pretty not good Steelers team. He had almost 5,000 yards, led the league. Jameis Winston. We're talking about people on bad teams stacking up production. Jameis Winston led the league in 2019. And the Vikings could actually be a good team, but Kirk kind of one of the. He's always like a bankable attempts, bankable volume. Like the defense is still not great for the Vikings, and as we said, we're hoping it's just a more modern, better designed offense. Kirk did strike me as awfully tempting at 20-1.
Yeah, I like that play a lot. I like that a lot. Drew, I wanted to ask you something real quick, man.
Sure.
Because I was looking at a couple of these odds. I know Aaron Rodgers definitely struck me at 14-1. I was going to ask you about your thoughts on that, and definitely the AFC West in general. Like, Justin Herbert, Derek Carr, Patrick Mahomes, Russell Wilson. Like, can we just break up a unit and sprinkle on all four of these guys? Like, what do you think about that?
That's definitely a compelling argument. I just don't have I don't see the prices there for those guys, frankly. Yeah. And Herbert is probably maybe one of the falsest favorites of anything we've talked about so far. Joe Lombardi's system, you think all of a sudden we're just going to open up this offense? I mean, Herbert, if you look at kind of the telltale characteristics of him, particularly last year, I thought he played within the system very, very faithfully. And what Lombardi, you need somebody who's going to break the rules a little bit, or Tom Brady, who forces the system to be done the way he wants it. And at least for now, it doesn't seem like Herbert is that guy. And so I really have a tough time that seeing him at the top of the board. Mahomes similarly with some of the changes to the offensive system in general and positional players around him is crazy to me at 8-1. Stafford is crazy to me at 9-1, particularly with the current conversation going on around how they're going to try to keep him relatively fresh for potential playoff run, as opposed to letting him air it out aggressively all season with the elbow injury he's dealing with. So I think there is a lot of room and a lot of margin in terms of some of these guys at the top not really being true priced. And as you look down the board, I think the AFC West being in general a very competitive division has merit. And I wonder if that doesn't give us an opportunity to look at a guy like Russell Wilson, who's at 18-1, who all of a sudden, I don't know that they're going to completely unlock his ceiling in the way that we saw, say, the first half of, the Let Russ Cook season. Of course, if he gets 17 games where they are, deploying him in that manner, he is going to put up banana stats. There's no denying that. But, in the back of my head, has he been solved a bit? Does he have enough weapons? Do they have enough weapons in Denver to, get that, kind of a mark? It's tough for me to buy into it. So I think that there is very much life for a long shot on a bad team to compile enough stats like we saw in both 2019 and 2020 that you guys have pointed out. The fact that there is a lot of repeat guys at the top of this list as you go down the board has me wondering what we see and expect from a guy like Jameis Winston. Do the New Orleans Saints let him air it out? They have invested a lot in this wide receiving core. Michael Thomas looks healthy. Chris Olave looks like a good fit with this system. And the Saints in general, I mean, they're in a bad division, but that cuts both ways. They could be leading in a lot of games, but they also, get to face some pretty questionable secondaries over the balance of their season. So, that's an interesting one to me, at least at the current price. And the fact that he has done it before is makes me wonder if he ought to be 30-1. But I think the long shots are really where you ought to start shopping in this market. And I think we've covered some of the guys with some of the upside there.
I'll just say Jameis was 50-1, 51 at one point. Oh. Sharps are on him, Drew.
I'll just say with Jameis, going from Sean Payton to a defensive-minded coach, just kind of doubt Dennis Allen will stake his second chance on, I'm going to cut Jameis loose. That's always worked. So I do, even though it is tempting, because like you said, the massive investment in the receiver core, I just feel like Dennis Allen would probably rather quit than stake his second chance fully on Jameis Winston.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I like it for some lunch money. It's not that bad. They got Jarvis Landry too.
Justin Fields at 100-1, guys.
That is a lottery ticket for sure. That one. We're better betting lowest scoring team on the Bears than betting that. But
there's literally no case to be made for Justin Fields. Quite literally no
Pat,
case.
I'll give you 100-1 that Justin Fields leads passing any given week.
Yeah, I don't say there's no. I could craft an argument. There's quite literally no argument I could craft for Justin Fields leading the league in passing this year.
He could get traded, I guess.
Yeah, well, I probably still wouldn't help him out. But let's talk about Offensive Player of the Year. This one, to me, again, another wide open market. Cooper Kupp won last year. He was the first guy since Marshall Faulk, another Ram, to win 3 straight years. Cooper Kupp looking for back-to-back. Again, no tight ends ever won this award, so guys, don't give me a tight end at all. This has been a receiver and a quarterback market. So, Jay, where are people putting their money for this? Again, I'm sure you're going to be going to the long shot. So where are we going?
Yeah, it's a tough market for me to talk about after my 70-1 Jonathan Taylor ticket last year didn't cash. But look, most people are betting on guys like Justin Jefferson, Devontae Adams, Taylor 10-1, Kupp. But this is my favorite futures bet of all the ones that we've talked about so far. And it's Lamar Jackson at 25-1 to win Offensive Player of the Year. I think that it's a difficult thing to just kind of conceptualize because the market does skew away from quarterbacks, or at least it has recently. I mean, we've had voters articulate that they say that, MVP is for quarterbacks and this is for everyone else. But at the same time, quarterbacks have won recently. And I think that Lamar Jackson is kind of a cheat code for this market because of his rushing ability. And I just think that he is the guy who is clearly the favorite to account for most of his team's offense, total offense. Lamar Jackson is the guy. And, he has a good chance at 4,000 yards passing, 1,000 yards rushing. He was basically on track for that last season. It was shorter than 25-1. I think that he breaks the all-time total offense record, which is 5,300, 5,400 yards. So I just think that Lamar, he's obviously a bit of a lightning rod, and there are divergent opinions about him. But at 25-1, I don't really care about the downside. And there's a ton of upside. I think the Ravens have a good chance of getting the 1 seed in the AFC, particularly if there's no Deshaun Watson around. I just think there's a lot of upside with that team, with Lamar Jackson. So he would be my look at 25-1.
Seems like you stole my entire cap, to be honest with you. Because you literally made every point I was going to make about Lamar Jackson. And with this award in particular, you said the quarterbacks have been winning lately. Since 2010, 6 quarterbacks have won, 4 receivers, 2 running backs. Before that, going from the last 21 years, 11 running backs, 9 quarterbacks, 2 receivers. So we see, obviously we talk about it as becoming a passing game in the NFL, but this is also more of a passing award, and the quarterbacks are winning it more often now than the receivers or the running backs. So, Pat, where are you going with this one? You got a receiver, a running back? Because I only bet Lamar Jackson and Justin Jefferson. That's all I bet so far for this.
I mean, all summer, we don't need to rehash this one, but in my head, for some reason, when the Offensive Player of the Year will occasionally come into my head, I don't know why. It feels like to me Justin Jefferson's award to lose, but I also just love Jamar Chase at 30-1, where Drew kind of hinted earlier. Jamar Chase is kind of like a model breaker. Joe Burrow is kind of a model breaker. And Jamar Chase, he was pretty widely billed as the best receiver prospect since probably at least Amari Cooper in 2015. And when you come in as a rookie and immediately live up to your pre-draft billing, everything that was special about you in college kind of immediately translating to the NFL game. I mean, 13 touchdowns, 1,500 yards as a rookie. You could claim the touchdowns will regress, but there's a chance that Jamar Chase is just one of those every 10 or 15 year receivers where he's just unguardable. He's just one of those truly dominant figures of the position. And when we kind of thought he could be that, then he was already that. And again, he's a model breaker. His quarterback's a model breaker. It's kind of hard. I really like Jamar Chase in the mix for Offensive Player of the Year.
I feel like this is not that complicated. There's one guy who stands so far above the next best guy at his position, and it would be Max Payne for Jay that Jonathan Taylor won at 10-1. So I think we don't overthink this. Taylor takes it a meaning, because realistically, what do you expect from a year 2 to year 3 from a player. You expect some meaningful step forward. And if that happens for Taylor, the numbers are going to be absurd. And, the system is set up well for him. You don't have a lot of easy schedules in the AFC, but somehow the Colts have kind of an easy one. And I think realistically, even if it, be it based mostly on touchdowns with a slight increase in his production from a rushing yardage standpoint, I don't know how you get past that. The case for Lamar Jackson is strong. The price is better. But, I think when, as we kind of went through the wide receivers, the fact of the matter is there's a lot of guys who have potential to be kind of perceived as wide receiver one at the end of the season. Like the margins are just kind of narrow. And so that will make it tough for people to kind of plant a flag, I think, on a wide receiver for offensive player of the year this year. It wasn't that hard last year with Kupp. I think it's going to be tougher this year. I don't think, but I think the running back gap between Taylor and the next best is big enough that he's got to be at or near the favorite throughout the balance of this season. It's just a matter of if a guy like Lamar Jackson or some other quarterback does enough in terms of total offense to steal some of that thunder. But it's for me, this is another one that it's Taylor or pass.
Yep, I 100% agree. I would make Taylor the clear favorite for all the reasons that you outlined, Drew. And I think the biggest thing to think about with this award is that it always goes to the guy who is the identity of his offense. He is the singular guy you look at. And this is why I was all in Jonathan Taylor last year over Cooper Kupp, because Taylor had Carson Wentz as his quarterback and Cooper Kupp had Matthew Stafford, who was an MVP candidate. But then Stafford started throwing picks for fun, and then Kupp all of a sudden became the identity of the offense. And I think that Taylor is clearly going to be the identity of the Colts offense. I like Pat's look on Jamar Chase just because he's so young and has so much upside, but he will suffer from having Joe Burrow as his quarterback. Well, that's still going to be Burrow's team. Justin Jefferson, he won't suffer from Kirk Cousins. That's Justin Jefferson's offense. That's his team. Again, Lamar Jackson, he is Baltimore. He's everything about that team. He loses nothing to Rashad Bateman or Mark Andrews in the context of an award like this. But I agree with Drew that Taylor should be the clear favorite, but I would look at Lamar Jackson as the best of the long shots.
Jay, I love your point about this award kind of being like the heartbeat of the offense type player. But when you think back, someone like Cam Newton won it in 2015, and I loved you tying Lamar Jackson into that, and I would just also then maybe tie Christian McCaffrey into that. Because whenever I see any Christian McCaffrey odds or props, I'm just like, well, what would this number be if you told someone Christian McCaffrey will actually be healthy this year? And he'd have much shorter odds, and I could see Christian McCaffrey. I mean, not that I'm breaking any ground here. Like, of course, if Christian McCaffrey is healthy, he's going to be like an elite player in the running for multiple awards. But it's hard for me to leave Christian McCaffrey out of that mix too.
Yeah, I think the fact that he almost needs the Panthers to be surprisingly in the mix for a playoff spot to get the attention, to get the consideration, even if his stats are really good. I think because once, as we know very clearly from the offensive rookie of the year market, the way that flipped on its head at the end of the season last year, it was because people were really dialed into what are these teams that are on the brink of the playoffs doing right now? Like what's happening and in the and that element to this complicates it a bit. The only thing I could add, because I'm taking a pretty strong stand here on Jonathan Taylor. The one thing that's kind of in the back of my head that's a little concerning potentially is what if Michael Pittman emerges and is just an absolute monster for that team from a receiving standpoint. He's the clear wide receiver one. Matt Ryan has kind of a long history of developing a strong relationship with his top guy and just feeding him. So I think in my Taylor kind of insurance portfolio, I'm gonna put a little Pittman receiving leader at 50-1, which seems a little crazy to me because Pittman, I think, projects as a top 5 wide receiver from a fantasy standpoint this year, and production in general, I think is going to be pretty amazing. If you kind of go through last year, and again, like not to take this too hard into a Colts podcast, but Carson
what's
Wentz,
going on here?
Carson Wentz
sure.
Nyheim Hines,
No,
man.
we can't talk about these offensive awards and not bring up the fact that Carson Wentz was just an absolute disaster, even in putting up decent production last year. And I think realistically, there were so many games and so many instances where Pittman was just running amok, wide open, just created massive separation against man coverage, and Carson didn't even look at him. And if Matt Ryan is, operating with the intelligence we know he has at the quarterback position, then Pittman is going to be surprisingly productive this year. So I think that's maybe the only thing you kind of have to keep in the back of your mind about any of this bullishness about Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah, I could definitely get down with Michael Pittman. In fantasy, I mean, he's going to be the guy I think that makes a lot of leagues, the winners of all your leagues. But yeah, Matt Ryan, you can't get worse than Carson Wentz or Baker Mayfield last year. So I just want to point out those two are one and the same. But Pat, I do want to ask you what you're getting up to this summer. We know NFL season's obviously underway now. So break down what you're going to be up to and where we can find your work at.
Well, I got to be grinding Hall of Fame game film after this. All these reps for the Raiders running backs. That's pretty much my Friday. Now I'll be in Canton next weekend with you, Vaughn, at the Fantasy Football Expo. Quite literally, our entire team's going to be there. Denny, cool. Karain, so on and so forth. That'll be great. Just have an article up today highlighting the recent rankings changes I've made to our draft guide. So check that out. And of course, get the draft guide. The article's free, but the draft guide, get the draft guide if you haven't already. You may have heard we hired a guy named Matthew Berry. Got a lot of his stuff on the site right now. So check that out. And I'm going to have rankings updates coming every week. And, I'll just be going and chilling in Canton next weekend. So that's what I got going.
Well, I can't wait to chill with you. Jay, what do you got going on over there? You still in Colorado? It looks like it from your background.
Yeah, it does look like it, doesn't it? I am in Colorado, yeah. This summer I'm going to be buying a lot of Baltimore Ravens merch to get my Lamar Jackson bets home. And then, we'll be pricing out markets and looking forward to NFL kicking off. It's been a quieter few weeks, so it's going to get busier.
It's been a quieter few weeks for you, but a profitable one for PointsBet because baseball season's still going on. So you appreciate us as much as we appreciate you, Jay and Pat. Make sure you follow Pat on Twitter at RotoPat and check out him hosting NBC Sports EDGE, a good football show, and all the written content on the website, along with all the good stuff that we talked about earlier. Jay is Croucher JD on Twitter, and he'll be joining us every week on Bet the Edge, as always, giving us insight. So thank you, guys. Enjoy the weekend, and we'll see you later.
Thanks, guys.
See you.
All right, edge of the day, Drew. Mine's a future, so you have to go first because everyone wants some action lately today. Is your game today? What's your bet on?
Of course. Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of tennis going on, and it's going on in North America, which means it is in the daytime and in the evening for those of us in US time zones, which is fun because usually I don't give out a ton of tennis on this show because it's either already happened or it's about to happen. This match is later today. It's in San Jose. The WTA has kind of really put together one of the most competitive and outstanding fields we've seen for kind of a non-major tournament in a while. And this San Jose field has delivered. The tennis has been outstanding. And we have quarterfinals today between a number of really, really high quality players, high quality matches. I can see almost all four of these matches going over their totals, but the one I've got circled is Coco Gauff, America's emerging star, up against Spain's Paula Badosa. This goes off this afternoon. It's the third of four matches today in San Jose. And right now, the market is pretty sure Coco Gauff is going to win. And I take extreme objection to that. Coco is coming off of a later match yesterday where she played Naomi Osaka, and it was a very, very challenging match for her. She ultimately comes through 6-4, 6-4, but not after giving a ton of ground back to Osaka later in that second set. Coco Gauff is a very strong player. This is not necessarily her preferred court speed, however, and I think this setup in general is very strong for Paula Badosa, and I rate this court very similarly to the Indian Wells court, where these two went head to head last fall, and Paula Badosa got the better of Coco Gauff in straight sets. And then realistically, I think Paula Badosa did not perform especially well in her last match out. She barely came through. People have kind of using that as a reason to downgrade her when in fact, I think she may have been looking a little bit ahead to this match. So Badosa is a live dog in my opinion at plus 150, and there's various ways to attack that. You can go after the set handicap. You can go after the games handicap. I have chosen to go after the over 21.5. Even if Coco Gauff, is ultimately the better player here, it's not going to be easy. I think 3 sets are very, very, very reasonably expected here, and over 21.5 is too good of a price to pass up. My fare is 23.5, so I got about a 2-game margin there, and you can get over 21.5 at minus 115. The only kind of leak here is if Badosa wins in straight sets, I'm going to be sweating this. But frankly, when you have a live dog and you have 2 players that have played each other a couple of times and they've split matches, I think expecting a longer match is entirely in the cards, particularly on this surface. So over 21.5 in the Coco Gauff Paula Badosa match.
I like that, Cap. It's 7:30 p.m. Eastern time tonight. Go get you some Friday night tennis, baby. Coco Gauff, always electric to watch her play. So I'll be down with that one. You want to know where I'm going today? I actually have a question for you. How many quarterbacks did the New Orleans Saints play last season?
Different quarterbacks?
Different quarterbacks. How many?
Well, you're asking me that like it's going to be a huge number. So 22
quarterbacks, my man. No, they had 4, not quarterbacks, not cornerbacks. But we'll get to the cornerbacks here in a minute. But quarterbacks, they started 4 of them last season. So everybody was obviously like pretty cold on the Saints. But now, Drew, everybody's ramping up. Who Dat Nation is getting ready to go because the over 8.5 wins is still plus money. The Saints to make the playoffs, still plus money. And I'm thinking, why? Why would you not want to bet that right now? Because the Saints with Jameis Winston last year, 5-2 on the money line, 4-3 ATS. In the 2 years with Winston, 9-3 on the money line, 8-4 ATS. These guys went out and got Trevor Penning to replace Teron Armstead, which was a big key in my opinion. They got Jarvis Landry, who we didn't mention too much earlier, along with Chris Olave. And guess what? Now Michael Thomas is back looking healthy. We can't forget that he was an offensive player of the year 2 years before Cooper Kupp was. And then Alvin Kamara, guess who got his hearing postponed? This guy might not even get suspended this season, which is what we're all waiting on to bet on the Saints. But I don't think you have to wait any longer if you haven't already, because the Saints from weeks 1 through 8 were a great team, and they went out and got better this offseason. We talked about the offensive side of the ball, but defensively, they got Marcus May from the Jets. They pair him with my main guy, the honey badger of Tyrann Mathieu. The reason why I wore number 7 in high school, this guy is electric, and that duo, along with Marshawn Lattimore, the number 1 corner for the Saints, is going to be all that they need defensively, along, of course, Cam Jordan, the spiritual leader of the Saints. So I like this team a lot in NFC South Division that they can win. If you're talking about plus 350, they could absolutely contend with the Bucs for this position. They're going to be beating up on the Panthers and the Falcons all year. They got a couple tough games, Raiders, Seahawks, Cardinals, Vikings, but they could take advantage of those games and win those. So give me the over 8.5 wins. If you catch our show last week, Drew talked about betting the win totals and how sometimes it's better going against the playoff markets. So if you like the playoff market as well, you can get better odds with that too. And that is the bonus play for me. So I'm in love with the Saints this year from the weeks 9 to 13 when they lost all their games and they had all the different quarterbacks playing. Throw it out the window, Drew. That's old news, my friend. This is a new season, a new Saints team. Good old defense, better offense. I like them to make the playoffs and go over 8.5 wins.
Yeah, I share your sentiment about being bullish of the Saints' opportunities this season. I like them to win the South. I think the Buccaneers are vulnerable. And yeah, I think surely the NFC is weak, and the Saints have a very talented roster. Those are facts. And so expecting them to finish in the top 7 in a weak conference seems like a no-brainer if you're getting plus money. So I agree with your take.
Let's get it. We're riding the Saints to make the playoffs, over 8.5 wins. And we got Coco Gauff and Paula Badosa over 21.5 games today. Those are the edge of the days. We got a little bonus one for you guys. Drew, it was a great Friday, man. Appreciate hanging with you for the almost hour we went live today. So don't forget to check out NBCSportsEdge.com. All the information you guys need if you're done listening with us. Of course, we got Matthew Berry on the staff now, so make sure you guys go check out the website. He's got all his rankings as well. Thanks for you guys watching on the YouTube channel here at NBC Sports. Make sure you guys subscribe, download, and rate the podcast too if you're listening to us. Thanks again, and good luck with your plays.